Melanie St. James here, videoing in from Harare, Zimbabwe on Pulse of the Movement. Today we are exploring human security, the rise and fall of peace. As many of you have been hearing, we have a big terror threat and there's a wall being built. We are protesting, some of us, the creation of a Muslim registry in the United States. And as I've been having debates about this with family members and just everyday people that I meet, there's been a real question of, why aren't more Muslim Americans coming out and talking about this? And I just have seen a lot of misconceptions in the media, and personally through my own travels and living with Muslim families in Africa and throughout school, and I just see there's a lot of bridges that need to be built. And so this episode was inspired from that desire, and I'm learning a lot. So here we are with our first guest, Leena Barakat, an incredibly inspiring young woman who Empowerment Works first met in her role with a fiscally sponsored project called Visualizing Impact, with headquarters in Beirut, Lebanon, in Canada, and in the United States through Empowerment Works. Leena is now working with the Tides Foundation in San Francisco and is the Strategic Partnerships Advisor. She has an incredible history as a project management leader, working with the Holt Prize, Berkeley, and other clients. And now, Leena, I am so honored to have you share your perspective with your human rights background and your lifelong dedication to social change. As a mother and with your background as a Palestinian born in Southern California and raised here in the US, what is your definition of human security?
Thank you, Melanie. I think it's good to see you again. So that's a great question. I guess there are two ways you can look at human security, or two sort of widely accepted notions of it. You have the human-centric approach, and you have the state-centric approach. And with the human-centric approach, it really puts the people and their safety, dignity, civil liberties ahead of anything else. You have the state-centric approach, where many people sort of believe that it's state and national security. Preserving that first is a way to get to, individual human security. I fall more with the human-centric approach in the sense that, many studies have shown and political scientists have found that, preserving state security alone, we're seeing this, currently as we speak, is not sufficient to achieving that. So that's really what it is. And then I guess at a more basic level, it's that sense of psychological safety, so that mental security, ideally economic and political stability, all of these factors really, cultivate a full and holistic version of human security. So preserving those rights and those liberties.
Great. And more personally, as a mom with a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, Maya, what are you seeing for her and creating a more secure world?
It's scary. And I really never thought I would say that, Melanie. I really never thought I would say that. I wore the headscarf, the hijab, by choice from the time I was 16 and until recently. So almost about 11 years. And it was some of the proudest moments of my life, because I felt like, as a born and raised American, I felt very secure in my identity as an American, and equally secure in my identity as a Muslim and a Palestinian. And I felt, the hijab was one way for me to present both. Of course, not everyone sees it that way. I was in many ways later in my life was othered by that. I had many people in the beginning, when before things became as bad as they are now, would hear comments like, your English is so good. Where did you learn to speak? When did you come to this country? And I'm like, I was born in Los Angeles. What do you mean? You know, I never saw myself as being any different. I went to the same concerts as everyone else. I, you know, was into the same sort of music, read the same books. I mean, it was very, very normal for me to be very confident, secure in my, in those two identities. But other people did not see it that way, maybe because of their lack of exposure or, you know, their own sort of biases. And, you know, as things, you know, being in a post 9/11 world, my hijab quickly went from, you know, sort of faith, you know, charged in my own convictions about faith, to being more of a, what's the word? A political stance. It was my way of challenging the stereotypes and challenging the biases and kind of putting it in people's faces, because then the comments went to, you know, wow, you are really smart for, you know, a Muslim woman, or, you know, you can play tennis with that on, and these assumptions that I can't be a happy, free-spirited, active, you know, person, you know, it's, to me, was just, I was very proud in challenging that. And then, you know, something happened, you know, around the latest election cycle, and it just got ugly. And, you know, I was, you know, personally attacked twice. And I felt, you know, I have a very sort of strong, I have a strong personality, and I, you know, was able to, I withstood it without really being too shaken up by it. But I couldn't help but also feel like, you know, my daughter was with me during one of them. She was 6 months old, and she was in a cart. I had her in her car seat. I was at the grocery store, and the car seat was on the cart. A woman came from behind me, and she pushed me while I was pushing the cart, and I was in the parking lot. And the cart with Maya in it went flying in the parking lot where cars are driving in and out, and I fell. You know, and luckily someone else was able to, you know, catch the cart and help me get up and, you know, put her in her place, secured. I mean, it was all handled well, but I just, you know, it dawned on me that this is very different than what it used to be. And so, you know, while I was very lucky and very fortunate to grow up in a very open-minded, sort of liberal community and environment in Southern California, it's really not the same everywhere else. And so I think, you know, it's difficult. I mean, in the same community that we've, you know, my mother, you know, she still wears the headscarf, and she's been in the States since she was 16, 17 years old. She doesn't have an accent or anything at all. She's the typical soccer mom. She, you know, now walks into Target and, you know, is the dirty stares, the harassment, it just ensues. And so, you know, it is scary times. It is very different times. And the best you can do is be the best version of yourself, and, you know, be sort of very knowledgeable, comfortable, and secure in who you are in both identities, and hopefully, you know, use education as a sort of a tool to inform and empower others to understand, you know, the world the way you see it as much as you can.
So before I go on to more general threats to human security, and thank you so much for sharing about the different types of human security, state and personal. I think that's a really important lens. So Leena, I'm hearing there's a lot of new threats to you, your family. Clearly, we've heard of hundreds of new attacks in schools against Muslim children, against immigrants. This is happening. There is a phobia. It's real. And from your perspective, where do you see this is coming from?
That's a really good question. And on the point about, you know, the attacks that are happening, I think this is something that is more and more the hate crimes that are happening against Muslim Americans and other minority groups. You know, I want to be clear that, I mean, what's the attacks that have happened on, you know, my community and specifically my family, I don't want to, it's not very fortunate that it has not been, frequent, prevalent, or even something that's been ongoing. They've been, I think, one-off instances, which is a result of just the political climate and people's lack of, people's ignorance and their, lack of empathy and really understanding for what's going on. To answer your question about where is it coming from, I want to, it's not a, my answer is it's media and it's personal biases, or the bubbles that the filter bubbles we've created. So I think the media has done a profound job, as it always has, really, in influencing the minds and the masses of the people. Where they get their sources and how they create narratives. Oftentimes is really the only sort of information outlet for people, and this is where they get their information, and this is where fear mongering comes from. And then they surround themselves, we all surround ourselves, including you and I, Melanie, I'm sure, with our filter bubbles, right? Our friends and those who are very aligned with our values, and who we see. We often want to surround ourselves with people that we just fundamentally agree with. It's only natural, but those are with these bubbles, we reinforce those biases. Sometimes it's for the better, quite frankly, and other times it's not. Other times it's, one bad piece of information that was shared by a trusted source, as Obama actually very eloquently said in his farewell address. Whether that's true or not, you're more likely to accept it because it came from a source that you agree with, trust, or value. So I think that's a huge problem. And I think that is a huge threat to human security in one way. And I know that sounds like it's a stretch, but in reality, many people's, the fear mongering that's happened, and their convictions against, Muslims, and their ideas of radical Islam, and this crazy notion that, we're out to spread Sharia everywhere, is really sort of rooted in many ways baseless and factless information. So it's their sort of own biases that reinforce their sort of theory of change, and it's really unfortunate that it's really at the expense of their peers, fellow Americans, Muslim Americans, and it's nothing new. I mean, this is, I think, groups have been targeted since the beginning of time to sort of fit an agenda, really. I think that, it's in many, like the Japanese, they were targeted at one point, and they were, you had many groups that, and to justify the entry into a war, or to justify the passage of a very politically charged bill that otherwise would not have gained support. They say that, you learn in school, political science classes, that the easiest way for the state or governments to really get what they want and get the people behind them, I mean, look at Vietnam, look at Iraq, is to have a common enemy, and they have to create the narrative around that. So, the way I look at, what's going on today, and really with anything, is I always ask, who's benefiting? Who's benefiting from what's happening? In the last, we can start with 9/11, and to this day, how many years has it been? I mean, have the Muslims or Islam, has it benefited once from anything that's happened? When you look at, recently what's going on with ISIS, I mean, the most victims in the ISIS attacks are Muslims themselves. And people often overlook that and don't see that. I mean, this is why we can get into it at a later time. I mean, you see this sort of refugee crisis that's happening, but Muslims have not benefited one bit from anything that's going on, from these sort of one-off, attacks that's happened, or domestically or internationally. But the facts are, when you look at it, you're more likely to get attacked or killed by a cow, literally, look this up, than you are by being impacted by a terrorist attack. It's just, it's this whole thing has been completely overblown, and I think it's the media and the government is trying to shape a narrative, and today it's us, tomorrow it'll be someone else, and the day before it was someone else. So it's horrible. I just wish we were in a place where we would have learned from history and understand what's going on here, and really sort of banded on to sort of stand up for one another a little bit more. But social media has done a really great job in sharing information. And we do live in the information age. And I think with that and the power of social media, I think we're seeing a lot of improvement and a lot more solidarity.
So Leena, absolutely. You mentioned we have more of a likelihood of being killed by a cow on the road. I actually read a similar figure. I think being hitting a deer or something in a car accident or drowning in your own bathtub there's a much higher likelihood than a terrorist attack, and also understanding that 40% of actual terrorist attacks have nothing to do with radical Islam. They're because of mental illness, which is a huge issue in this country. And so looking at your work with Tides and all of the incredible solutions that you're involved in, what are the greater threats to human security and some of the solutions? But really, what should we be working on to create a more secure future for everyone?
I don't think we're doing a great job there's a lot of solidarity. And I think there's a lot of people, on this sort of scale, there's, generally we agree on what the issues are, in the field, that is, and especially among activists who are really trying to, create change and improve the lives of those who, especially the most vulnerable, who are affected. However, I don't think we've done a necessarily great job at unifying certain principles, strategies, and tactics together. I think the right has done particularly well at this. I mean, the most sort of basic level, when the minute Obama was elected into presidency, they began organizing immediately to basically change the entire face of office. And now look what we see. It's red at every level, at every step of the way. They organized swiftly. And I think there's a little bit, there's good things about being decentralized, and there's things that are not so great about it. And I think so, back to the issue areas, a huge threat to human security. Off the top of my head, that stands out really is on a national domestic, it's surveillance. I think that's something that, swept the, our news feeds for a while as something that's happened, especially with, the issues that Edward Snowden really brought to light. I think is a massive threat, because now we're turning, on a domestic level, we're moving closer and closer, if we're not already a big brother state. That is a huge threat to human security. And I think, if we were to really see that human security is an integral part of achieving and maintaining international peace, I think we could all do a better job to protect that. If we start at that as the base level, I think a lot can come into line, and there would, I think it would do away with many of the conflicts and the issues that we have, because at least we unify on that. Whenever I speak about very contentious issues, whether it be Israel-Palestine, whether it be about Syria, whether, any of these sort of issues, and the one thing, or even, with the Black Lives Matter movement, the one common ground I'm always able to connect with those from the other side, those who sort of see very differently than us, is this notion of human security. And that's just something no one can do without. And I think the more we understand that, the more we accept that, the more we use that as a frame, I think the more likely we're going to be able to connect with the other side, and hopefully sort of a better sort of future lies ahead with that.
So when you say the other side, people who think differently than we do, people who might be on another part of the political spectrum?
It is. It's not think differently as if there's the one that's better than the other. I think the people, their ideologies are driven by their own personal circumstances and conditions. When I think about the other side, I'm thinking about the left and the right, the red and the blue, or even the green, as part of that. So it's for me, it's one of the failures in this election cycle is this sort of is our own as Democrats or as the left, and we've become sort of elite in our own way, and this sort of, actually Bernie addressed it as the Democratic elitism, and I think that's spot on. We've written off a lot of those who supported Trump as just being racist and being bigots and uneducated, when that's just simply not true. I mean, a lot of what's happened, you know, that's affected their lives, you know, economically, and their livelihoods really sort of shaped their decisions going, you know, towards Trump. And quite frankly, they were just fed up of the system at large, and they didn't want that repeated. But we did not take the time to have that conversation and to connect with them more. And so I can take that on again, domestic, but even internationally, when I think about all of the bigotry against Muslims, and you know, it's so simple, but talk to a Muslim. Just talk to one. I mean, you know, we're mostly great people. So there's really the fear is it in some ways it cracks me up if it wasn't so serious. You know, I want to laugh about, you know, on what are you so afraid of?
So jumping back into the questions, I do want to mention this issue about the outcry about a Muslim registry in the United States.
Yeah.
And this has been brought up in the media. I know I signed at least one petition. I was really shocked to see some of the comments and people who said they wouldn't sign because they really felt that this was a prudent security measure. And again, from your human rights background and from a civil rights perspective, how do you see this? What's at stake?
Civil liberties are at stake, and honestly, dignity. Like at the very basic, you know, Muslims are being more and more dehumanized as these policies and these proposals come about. I mean, it's absurd to me. It took me really a while to believe it and to let it sink in. I just thought it was one of those just crazy things that was thrown out there by Trump in, you know, the heat of the moment, and, you know, didn't think it was something that would really be taken seriously and perhaps considered. I look to history. I mean, when has that ever worked? You know, did they find informants when they you know, try to, you know, with the Japanese internment camps, there was a form of registry that was created, you know, to be able to track and put the Japanese in internment camps. That didn't work. They didn't find any sort of, you know, at the time the concern were spies. You know, when you look at with the Jewish people, I mean, this is something that this country, as they should be, is so sensitized to. You know, and we saw and we use that all the time when we talk about the Holocaust, right? The stars and the badges that they had to wear. I mean, we're taught in schools, and then without even being taught, you just know that's not right, and nor was it effective, and nor was there any really sort of thought to it, other than to really dehumanize and humiliate a population. And so you know, when the fact that this is even being considered, and, you know, I watched actually a segment on, and they were interviewing one of Trump's campaign affiliates, and the journalist asked, doesn't this concern you that this is really something that you guys want to do? We've seen this before. And he said, well, exactly, no, this has been done before. I don't know why everyone's reacting. We've done this before. This is nothing new. And the interviewer goes, exactly. It was awful. Why would we repeat that? You know, it's been proven completely ineffective and whatnot. And he completely used that as a way to justify. So, I mean, there is a level of just crazy you can't really make, you know, sense of. And part of me is just happy doing, you know, just doing away with that. But at the same time, you know, I think it's been really beautiful to see the level of, you know, solidarity and people coming out and saying, you know, we're not gonna be, you know, we're gonna sign this petition and we're gonna, you know, register ourselves as Muslims. And there's a half of me that's like, but this is crazy to begin with, and the other half of me that's like, well, thank you. So, you know, I just it's a very scary thing. And then, of course, you know, going back to the question you asked about, you know, like raising Maya, my daughter, in this sort of day and age, and it terrifies me. I don't know. I constantly have to think, you know, about how am I going to prepare her or to have this conversation with her when that time comes about what's going on. And at this point, it could change at any point. You know, that it's. We have to continue to be rooted in who we are and hold on to the American values that were instilled in us. Just the very basic democratic values, and I don't mean Democratic Party, but the very civil liberties and civil rights is something that was created for a reason. And it created in response to situations like this and worse in the past. So I think the closer we hold on to that, the closer we continue to not fall subject to, these fears, to break out of our comfort zones, have conversations with people we wouldn't normally, eliminate as much as we can our biases. That's how I think we're going to improve relations going forward. Because, I can't tell you how many times, Melanie, I've had conversations with just average Joes, just people on, people at the grocery store, or people, at these sort of groups where I wouldn't speak to otherwise, and tell me, you really changed my mind about how I see this, specifically about Muslims, how they view Muslims and Islam. And I think for us Muslims to continue to be very willing to have these conversations and approachable. Some people are not very approachable, and that's of course, to each their own. But I think the more we're willing to open ourselves up to having conversations, just being who you are will do a lot to diminish some of the stereotypes that people have in their head.
Thank you, Leena. And to add to that, and that was really powerful, the power we have is the power to connect with people. Just get out of the machine, get beyond the media and be the media. And I love how you are being the media, and you are so compelling and lovable. So thank you for getting out there and representing. Your voice really matters. And what can we say to people out there, anyone watching this? How can we all be the solution? Are there any suggestions, calls to action, things that you would recommend or invite people to do to create a more peaceful, secure world anywhere, wherever we are on the planet?
I think, building off that point of the power to connect, I think should not be underestimated. Just the power of conversation, the power of, of course, not to sound cheesy, but really education and informing yourself of the issues going on. And, when different sort of narratives are built around certain people's, asking yourself, oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry.
Leena, I really see you being out there as the media, as much as the media may be going wrong. Thank you for that. And it's clear the power we have is the power to connect. And so in doing that, and just all the ways we can reach out, what can you tell people who are watching this today? What are some solutions for all of us to support a more secure, peaceful world wherever we are?
It's a loaded question, Melanie. How do we save the world? Building off the point on the power to connect, that cannot be underestimated enough. Just the ability to have those conversations, to getting out of your comfort zone, as I said earlier. These things are very important because this is how you shape opinions, and person by person. Beyond that, I think it's a lot of people tend to believe that, because they're not some sort of eloquent speaker, refined activist, or some sort of journalist, that they have no role in this, but that's simply not true. I think everyone has a role to play, whether it's the power of conversation or educating yourself and informing yourself on the issues. When narratives are shaped about certain groups, especially right now, ours tends to be the, Muslim Americans front and center, is, asking yourself who benefits and looking a little bit, deeper into that and questioning whether the source you're taking this from, is it just because it's a comfortable source? Have you considered other options? And shaping those sort of opinions for yourself that way. The other thing I would say is, while everyone has a role and everyone will sort of contribute in their own way, getting out of your comfort zone of just be like social media click activism, it's so easy. It's so easy, and you think you're kind of doing your part, and in many ways it's done a lot. But if there's more that you can do, whether it's showing up to a protest, being more civically engaged, I cannot emphasize the power of the importance of civic engagement. Calling your representatives. I know. I remember briefly, I remember in 2008, 2009, the attacks on the Gaza Strip, I was working with the Muslim Public Affairs Council at the time, and we went to go meet with the mayor of Los Angeles, and to sort of express our concern and his support for Israel. And we wanted to sort of have that conversation with him. And he said, I'm going to be honest with you guys, our phones are ringing off the hook. And the amount of calls we're getting, to continue our support for Israel is, he said it's almost 100 to 1 of the calls I'm getting from those who, want to speak towards the human rights issues in Palestine. He said, we just don't get calls from other communities as much as we do from this community. They're very well organized, and that's something to take. We need to be placing our calls to our elected officials and voice our concerns, as people don't want to go through the hassles or think it's not effective, but it absolutely is. So really, civic engagement, I think, is key.
Thank you so much, Leena. Thank you. It just means the world to have you with us today. And I really look forward to continuing this discussion and getting the word out and having more calls to action. So Absolutely. Thank you for being such a great voice out in the world and shedding light and how Absolutely. To connect all of these perspectives.
Thank you for having me.